The following is a Laura Flanders Show audio exclusive.
While Earth Day goes virtual in 2020, the climate crisis is all too real. From global warming to a global pandemic, our decisions are affecting our health and our planet. 50 years after Rachel Carson coined the term, our ecosystems making it pretty clear. We are all connected, even if some of us are closer to the front lines of pain and crisis than others. Will the new normal look more or less unequal? The following is a conversation I moderated with the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles this February with actor Jane Fonda and community organizer Janet Valenzuela. Fonda started weekly protests in Washington, D.C. called Fire Drill Fridays last year, inspired by the youth climate activist Greta Thunberg. Valenzuela, with East Yard's Communities for Environmental Justice, organizes against environmental devastation in one of the most polluted parts of L.A., the town called Commerce, through which a vast majority of all U.S. produce passes on its way from L.A.'s ports. Here are some excerpts from that conversation. Our Patreon partners can hear and download the whole thing at patreon.com/The LF Show. And you can join them. Every Patreon partner who contributes to the show helps free up all the content for everyone. That's at patreon.com/The LF Show.
So a month where temperatures in Antarctica rose to 65 degrees for the first time ever as our president was being acquitted of his impeachment. We have seen action on climate of many kinds. We're going to talk about the extraordinary actions that Jane has mobilized over the last many months. But let me start by giving you an idea of what comes together in the place that Janet represents. It's not even an hour south from here. A lot of things come together at the East Yard community. You have 40 to 60,000 trucks, most of them belching diesel, powering up the highway from the ports to take 40% of all the products that are distributed in the U.S. to their destinations. In the other direction, you have oil coming from L.A. area drilling to the refineries north of the harbor. And in that place, people live. And people live who have fought back and won fights that everybody told them were impossible. So we're going to hear more about what the communities do. Things came together for Jane in a time type of way last fall, where, as the title of her new book reads, she was asking herself, what can I do? And she moved from despair to action. October 11th saw the first Fire Drill Friday. They have grown in power and impact. They have brought back a practice of civil disobedience to our capital. And while a lot of people say that nothing gets done in Washington, they did a lot. So let's start with having you, Jane, talk a bit about that despair that you were feeling before you vaulted into action.
Thanks, Laura. Well, it's a thing now. I mean, psychologists call it climate despair, extinction despair. Especially when you're famous, there's a great responsibility, I think. I had stopped using single-use plastics. I drive an electric car. I did all those things that you're supposed to do to reduce your carbon footprint. But in my heart of hearts, I knew that's a great place to start, but it's just a starting place. That even if we all did that, it wouldn't be enough to get us where we need to go. And I didn't know what to do. And then I read on Labor Day weekend Naomi Klein's book, On Fire, The Burning Case for a Green New Deal. And as Naomi always changes my life with her books, but this time I knew within 40 pages that I needed to move to D.C. I needed to put my body on the line. I knew the science. I'd read it. It was hovering out there someplace, but I hadn't internalized it and metabolized it. And with that book and with reading about Greta, I took the science into me and realized I have to do something. There aren't two sides to the story. There's only one story. Now, the scientists are all in agreement. They all say the same thing. We have now 10 years maximum to cut our fossil fuel emissions in half and not drill or frack any new fossil fuels right now in order to reach the 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, just think what that means, cutting our fossil fuel emissions in half. We have an economy that's built on fossil fuels. So this is Herculean, what the science is telling us to do. Humankind has never done this before. 11,000 of them said the situation is drastic. They said only rapid transformational action can stave off global climate disasters. These are scientists. These are nerds. These are, forgive me if any of you are scientists, but you try to stay neutral under the radar. You don't come out and... Now scientists are like breaking down their lab doors with their white jackets and saying, wake up, people. This is it. We are the last generation that can save the future for our kids. So I called Annie Leonard, who runs Greenpeace USA, and I said, I want to move to D.C. and camp out in front of the White House for a year. And she said, well, that's great. But it's illegal. You can't do that. So we worked out a compromise every Friday, like the students, and we met with the students, and they agreed to welcome us, into their Fridays. The minute I got there, the depression lifted. Just like with Greta, the minute she started sitting in front of the Swedish parliament, her mutism, her depression lifted. She started eating again. She started smiling again. I highly recommend activism for an antidote to depression.
Janet, have you ever felt depressed where you are?
No, just sick. It's an honor to be here. I would first like to start off by recognizing that we're on occupied land. We're on Tongva land. And just saying that I'm really happy to be here, for my mom to be here. And my dad, who couldn't be here today because he was abducted by ICE, and he's in the Adalento detention center right now. Wow. Yeah, what we feel is sick and tired, right? And Laura talked a little bit about the infrastructure that's in our community. And a lot of the work we do is around the goods movement, right? How goods move. And you're talking about the LA ports and the Long Beach ports combined supply 40% of American goods. In order for those goods, right, to get to your homes, right, Amazons, the Prime members, oftentimes don't get to see the infrastructures that we live with, that we live on. And so you're talking about the rail yards, the 710 freeways, 40 to 60,000 trucks. And you have the diesel, you have the oil refineries, and yes, we have scientists to tell us that these are carcinogenic, that they do cause cancer. But then we have agencies, right? People that we put in those positions to regulate the industries that are telling us we can poison you a little bit longer, right? And how that's looking like right now with the fossil fuel industry is this introduction around natural gas as a solution, right? Or just transition, right? That we need just transition infrastructure. But in my community, we don't have the luxury to wait for that infrastructure to come into our communities, right? We have people that have cancers on the block. We have people that have high asthma on the block, right? And so we need zero emissions infrastructure because we know that these freeways are not going anywhere, right? These ports are not going to go anywhere. But at least we can move for the trucks to be zero emissions, right? For them to be fully electric, and that we use renewable energy as a sustainable way for our communities to just have the right to breathe clean air.
Janet, I don't want to pass so quickly over your father's situation and just share, I think, everyone's feeling of this is terrible and we want to hear more. And I imagine that you have done some thinking about how our migration and border policy relates to our apparent kind of no border policy when it comes to extraction. and fossil fuel development. So I don't know how you piece those pieces together in your head, but I'd love to hear.
One thing that I'll share is that East Shore Communities is a communal space, right? It's about family. And part of our work is grassroots. And so it's about thinking of environmental justice or environmental issues as intersectional, right? That we don't just, advocate for clean air or we advocate for parks in our community if then through housing or gentrification we are then displaced, right? And we don't get to enjoy the zero emissions infrastructure that we've been fighting for so long. And I think it has a lot to do with how do we frame the climate justice issue where immigrant communities can be a part of it, and at the same time we're fighting for both in terms of we want people to migrate, we want people to feel safe in this country, we want people to know that they won't be forced to be separated by their family. But when they do move to this country, they're often living by one of the most toxic industries or some of the busiest highways, right? And so that's where nonprofit organizations or grassroots work addresses some of those needs and those gaps.
Jane, how do you understand environmental justice and how it might be different? You've been an environmentalist in some ways for many years.
The things that are destroying the environment that us rich white people associate with begin at the place where the drill rapes the ground and the fracking puts all the chemicals into the ground. It's and the refineries and the places where they're exported. That's where it all begins. And those are deliberately put into low-income communities, communities of color, indigenous lands, and people are suffering right now. And we can't solve the climate crisis and the environmental crisis if we don't address the issue of environmental justice where it begins. So all of these large environmental organizations have to expand their hearts and their empathy and their understanding of what environments are. And that's the value of a Green New Deal, because it says we can't solve the problems unless we address this issue of environmental justice. We can't leave people behind. It's never worked. It's never worked.
You took on a struggle that was supposed to be impossible when you all shut down this Exide battery recycling plant. Do you want to talk about how you did it so maybe we can see how we can intersect with the work of grassroots organizations like yours?
So for those of you in the room that are not familiar with Exide, it's a lead battery recycling plant out of the city of Vernon.
So that means your car batteries, right?
Yeah, so when we, take our car to the mechanic and they let us know that they're going to be recycled, we think that was the best environmentalist thing we could have done, right? But yet those batteries travel to our communities where they're then put in recycling plants, and what Exide was doing, that it was melting down the lead, and then it was burning it through air smelters. And I was doing that for over 30 years, right? Because agencies are incompetent, they were being negligent. Later took, a lot of community power. It took a lot of working with the agencies.
A lot of mothers, you told me.
The Mothers of East LA, who were co-founded by our director's grandmother in the 80s, who then at that time, early on, got to visit the facility, and they were given protective gear, right? And when they walked in, they saw that the workers didn't have that gear, and so that's when they were able to draw that was an issue. But I think the key point to take away is that in our communities, these things take generations to shut down. This takes a lot of community power, and it takes people really talking to other people about this issue and applying that pressure to our agencies, who in some way find ways to be in favor for the industry and not in favor of community. And I guess they forget who they're there to serve, right?
Will renewables save us, which is something we're told a lot. Do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah.
Yes, go for it, Jane.
Yeah, the Fire Drill Friday demands were support the Green New Deal, no new fossil fuel extraction, and phase out existing fossil fuel with a just transition. It seemed like a no-brainer. But what I found out was this was unusual. For example, the Green New Deal doesn't mention fossil fuel. And a lot of the senators that support the Green New Deal and are good environmentalists, they never talk about fossil fuels, because that is the hard part of it. And yet that is the core of it. We can have all the windmills and all the solar panels and electric cars and everything. And if they keep drilling and fracking, we're going to go down the tube. It's not going to work. We have to stop them, keep it in the ground. And then what they're already pulling up has to be gradually phased out in a way that involves communities and workers and unions to make sure that those workers have very good jobs and that they're not left behind. But we can't just see Jerry Brown, interesting, you know, we all thought of him as the great environmentalist. And he was great on the windmills and the solar panels all the way back in the 70s. He helped the second husband, who was an environmentalist, Tom Hayden. Jody Evans is here, and she knew him well. You know, big supporter. He helped us get a windmill. He helped us get solar panels, but he never took on the oil industry. So the pressure now has to be put on Gavin Newsom, who gets it. Gavin gets it. He understands. We just have to really pressure him to stand up and just say no more. And in California specifically, shut down all wells, including orphaned wells and idled wells that are within 2,500 feet of houses and schools and hospitals and playgrounds. That would take a lot of oil and fossil fuels off of California's budget if we did that. I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? You can't have this stuff close to communities. It causes a lot of problems. People are dying. But nobody has stood up and said so. And they said, well, we're going to lose a lot of jobs. But you know where there's a lot of jobs? In the cleaning up. It's called the remediation of these wells and these fracking pits. Put people to work cleaning it up. We have to force Newsom to do it. Now. So it's got to be both, you know. Think of it as scissors. Scissors require two blades, right? Okay. In the climate crisis, one blade is the renewables, the green energy future, but the other blade is no fossil fuels. We got to have both at once.
For maybe our audience that are not in California, it would be helpful, people like me, to realign ourselves, because we think of California as the great green liberal bastion that's leading the nation right now on lots of good things and against lots of bad things. Why California? Why does California need a fire drill Friday, Jane?
Well, California is the 5th largest economy in the world. What happens here affects not just the rest of the United States, but the rest of the world. That's why Trump attacks us so much. You know, if California sets good emission standards on cars, the manufacturers in the middle of the country are going to be forced to make cars meeting those emission standards because we are such a big market. We're important. And we are, next to Texas, the largest fossil fuel producing state in the United States. And so if we are going to save ourselves from total catastrophe in the 10 years that the science gives us, California is the place where we have to stop fossil fuels. And oil has run California forever. I mean, Los Angeles, where we are right now, Tongva people lived on top of oil. This is a huge reservoir of oil under the ground of Los Angeles. It's enormous. And it's also one of the worst kinds of oil. It's worse or as bad as the Alberta tar sands oil. It's difficult to get to, it's energy intensive to get to, and it's very environmentally destructive. So
how do we connect the local, the regional, and the national? Because national groups paying attention to what's happening where you are is great, but not if they don't come and ask you what they need to focus on first. Or not if they don't say you have a place at the table first, right? So how do you do both? Because you're busy. How do you have local engagement that has regional and national impact?
We stay busy. We stay overworked. We stay underpaid. No, and honestly, it's that we have to build solidarity, first and foremost with indigenous people, because we see that where these pipelines are being built is to extract the oil that is then going to be sent to Long Beach. Well, it'll then be refined, right? And then we're gonna get the politicians and the people in the agencies that are telling us that natural gas is the best solution, right, to the climate change crisis and to our health. Right, but it's a transition, right? It's still that transition. It's still part of the petro industry, and so we should look at, LADWP, for example. We should look at Edison.
What's
and
LADWP for those of us who don't know?
It's the Department of Water and Power.
Got it.
And see what are their contracts, right? Is it still tied to the fossil fuel industry? Is it still trying to push natural gas? Because oftentimes we'll see that those infrastructures for the natural gas are going to be built in our communities or are going to be built in San Bernardino County. It's still frack gas. And what people can do is we need to show up in numbers to these agencies, right? We need to show up with our connections and our resources around. We don't need industry in these boards anymore. We don't need industry making the decisions around air quality. We don't need people that are in these positions of power that are pushing for the chemical industry, right, around pesticides. And it's very important to, as local, to have networks in the region that'll then work with the national, because we know that it's going to come back to our communities.
Now, it might be that somebody in this very room is on a board or attends a meeting or is part of a city council or community council group that doesn't have you at the table yet.
Yeah, check us out. East Share Communities for Environmental Justice .org. We have an Instagram. We have a Twitter. No, honestly, it comes down to when we have events, right? When we're supporting the Green New Deal and they're having panelists, are indigenous people at the table? Are indigenous people being paid to speak and paid to participate, right? Because that's how we sustain those individuals who are the most vulnerable to climate change. And that's how we sustain their families, right? That's how we sustain their communities. And so I think it's really important that people start connecting to the local politics and seeing who's in power and what contracts and where the money's coming from.
Yeah. Can I just add
Please.
one thing? Because voting is coming around now. The importance of down ballot, city councils. I'm only beginning to understand the potential power that the LA City Council has. The LA City Council could mandate a real Green New Deal, not a wishy-washy spaghetti spine Green New Deal, but a real one. And yet it's mostly made up of industry people and developers. So we have to pay attention to who we vote for on the city councils. And just because we don't know everybody's names, call people who might know who to vote for. We all have different people that we call for it. I call Andy Spahn, and I say, okay, tell me, who are these people? I don't know any of their names. Who should I vote for? And I get the names that are progressive. Boards of supervisors, and sometimes, of course, we don't choose who's on these various agencies. They're named by mayors and things like that. So we have to be prepared to pressure the mayors to appoint people who really represent the community and not just the big oil and the bad guys.
Did you want to add something? No. Well, having talked about voting, I want to ask you why civil disobedience, Jane?
Well, you don't start with civil disobedience, but we've pleaded and begged and petitioned and marched and rallied and written for 40 years, and they haven't listened, and so we have to step it up. And civil disobedience is, for example, what the young African-American students in Mississippi did when they sat down at the lunch counter that was segregated. There was a law, a bad law, and so they sat and they called attention. Us white folk up north, we wouldn't have really known what was going on. We wouldn't have known the depth of the brutality and the violence that was being meted out against black people in the South had it not been for those students and for Martin Luther King. Nonviolent civil disobedience. Gandhi changed the history of India through nonviolent civil disobedience. And one of the things that I've noticed, because, when we first went to D.C., Jody knows, we didn't know if it was going to work. We had no idea if it would gain traction. You know, just some aging celebrity comes bopping into D.C. and decides she's going to do this thing on Friday. But within a few weeks, people were coming from all over the country, from Oregon, from Washington, from Wisconsin, from Colorado, who had never in their life engaged in civil disobedience and risked arrest. You know, the first Friday, there were 16 of us that got arrested, and the last one, there was over 300. And one of the things that I know, well, they were mostly women. Very interesting. We could do a whole show on that. There are reasons. And the thing that I noticed, people changed. You know, my dear friend who's in Grace and Frankie, Sam Waterston, I love him so much, but he is as moderate as you can get. He had never spoken at a rally. He had never risked arrest in his life. And he did this because I asked him to. And when he came out of the detention, I could see that something was different. 2 weeks later, I get a photograph of him handcuffed on the playing field at the Yale-Harvard game. He'd gone and gotten arrested again with the students protesting their university's investments in fossil fuel. And then he came back again to Fire Drill Fridays with his sister and wife and did it again. Ted Danson, same thing. He came out of detention and he said, I'm different. I feel different. And I heard that from so many, I'm just mentioning the celebrities, but from so many people. We have so little opportunity right now to align our bodies with our values. And it's like you lose control. That's right. You're handcuffed and you're out of control, and yet you know that what you're doing is the right thing. And it changes you. And I think it has to become the new norm. Whoever gets elected, whoever it is, if it's the best possible person we can think of or the worst.
Getting arrested with Jane is clearly a gateway drug to action.
We have to be prepared to shut the government down if necessary. We have to be prepared. I mean, the scientists said transformational action. That's the only thing that can stave off climate disaster. Transformational action. I'm not kidding, folks. I mean, we're facing a crisis of climate and a crisis of democracy. We're not facing it. We're in the middle of it. We're right here in the middle of it. And we have to be prepared to put our bodies on the line. Okay? And if you can't do that, babysit for the people who are putting their bodies on the line, or bring food or medical care to the people that are putting their bodies on the line. Now's the time. This is it.
You know, where those rail yards are, that didn't used to be there. It was Japanese farms and gardens. Japanese people were living there. And then you had World War II happen, and Japanese families were then displaced from their communities, displaced from their homes, and were put into internment camps. And then that led to the gardens and the farms went away. And then NAFTA came in. And then through the North American Trade Agreement, you had to build infrastructure, right, to push for that supply and demand. And when that infrastructure came into the community, people started to feel different. You know, communities that are there, that are living through it, we're tired. We're tired of going through it. We're tired of going to the doctors, and we're also really tired of seeing that agencies, for example, pass policy around air quality and then fund programs that bring air monitors into our communities. We already know what's in the air. We don't need to monitor it, right? We need to fix it, and we need to hold those accountable, and that's industry and that's politicians that are quick to take money and put profit before our bodies.
The World Health Organization says that every day, 93% of the world's children under 15 breathe air so polluted it endangers their health and development. 93% of all children under 15 in the world.
So on my program, the Laura Flanders Show, we try to lift up positive models of shifting power in the worlds of arts, politics, and economics. And one of the projects that we've been following, and you can feel me shifting to what do we do, and what are some of the alternatives that we can be fighting for, as well as the things we want to stop. One of the projects we've been following is an amazing project in Brooklyn, where an 80,000 square foot Brooklyn Army terminal is being covered with solar panels in collaboration with Co-op Power NYC. It'll be a cooperative, and Uprose, which is an extraordinary grassroots environmental justice organization led by a woman called Elizabeth Yam-Pierre. And working together, they secured the contract from the city, amazing, to create a power center right there, a center of power, solar power, that will be community owned, which is both shifting power, and building power in the way that the Green New Deal imagines. What do you imagine, Janet and Jane, as a next step for this work? Yes, we have to stop the bad, but how do we have a new model for power and agribusiness while we're about it, so all this stuff isn't shipping from here to there when people, let's remember, are not allowed to move?
There's so many ways to answer that, honestly. And
Our
I think
Patreon partners can hear and download the whole thing at patreon.com/The LF Show. And you can join them. Every Patreon partner who contributes to the show helps free up all the content for everyone. That's at patreon.com/The LF Show.